So, you feel the need to control someone, right? Or maybe you're just here out of curiosity. Because of course, no one wants to admit that power is real, that manipulation shapes the world. You either control or you're being controlled. This society is terrified of the truth. It would rather stay asleep than acknowledge that someone is always pulling the strings behind the scenes. But as Carl Jung often pointed out, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. I'd rather know than live in denial. And now, you will too. I'm going to show you 7 techniques that can cause anyone to behave the way you want, without even realizing it. I'll start with the subtle ones, the kind that give you a quiet edge in any interaction, and end with the most powerful, the ones that shape another's will without raising suspicion. If you think this sounds dangerous, you're absolutely right. But what's even more dangerous is being unaware, because even if you never use these methods, someone else might use them on you. So pay close attention, because once you finish this video, you'll see the world through different eyes. Psychological mirroring, the subtlest form of influence. People trust what feels familiar. If you manage to resemble someone just enough, their defenses begin to drop, often without them knowing. Jung spoke of the shadow, the unconscious patterns that influence our behavior. Psychological mirroring is not crude mimicry, but a soft reflection of someone's energy. If done well, it creates trust invisibly. It all begins with body language. If they cross their arms, do the same after a few moments. If they lean an elbow on the table, casually echo the gesture. Don't be obvious or immediate. Move like their shadow, silent, fluid, adaptive, until you naturally start leading the interaction. You should also match the tone and pace of their voice. If they speak quickly, speed up just a little. If they speak slowly, lower your rhythm. The subconscious associates familiar tones with trust. Adjust your volume to match theirs, and they'll feel in sync with you, without questioning why. Words matter too. If someone says, "This doesn't feel right," don't shut them down with cold logic. Instead say, "Yeah, I feel that too." The unconscious accepts what's familiar, and when you match their language style, the connection becomes immediate. But this isn't just about mirroring. It's about leading. If someone is upset, don't rush to calm them. First, validate. Sit with them in their emotion, then gradually guide them toward calm. Don't push, lead. You'll know it's working when they start relaxing and unconsciously mirroring you. That's when trust is built. And once you have it, you can guide the conversation wherever you want, without them realizing. The best manipulators don't impose. They simply make everything unfold in their favor. The strategic use of silence. Make discomfort work for you. Most people hate silence. When a conversation stalls, they feel the urge to fill the gap with words, even if that means saying too much. Silence is awkward, but those who master it control it. When you say something important and leave a pause, especially after a question, you'll notice the other person feels compelled to respond, to justify, or to keep talking. They can't help it. The human brain hates empty space, and that's your opportunity. For example, if you want someone to tell you more, say less. Once they speak, stay quiet. Don't nod. Don't react. Just hold the space. That emptiness becomes unbearable, and in trying to break it, they'll reveal things they never meant to. This principle works in arguments too, or in negotiations. When someone pressures you for a quick response, pause. Don't rush to fill the silence with explanations. The longer you wait, the more anxious they become. The silence becomes your power. In that state, it is more likely that the person will yield first, feel unsure about their own position, or eventually accept what you propose. But silence is not only a tool for gathering information, it is also a way to express psychological mastery. If you make a strong statement and then fall silent, simply holding eye contact, you convey authority without ever needing to raise your voice. The discomfort will do the work for you. Try this in your next conversation. Use silence after a key question or a pivotal assertion. Don't rush to fill the gap with more words. Just watch as the other person begins to squirm, to question themselves, and unknowingly, they hand you control of the entire exchange. The one who can withstand the silence holds power in the conversation. This taps into what Carl Jung called the tension of opposites, where transformation occurs not by action, but by remaining consciously still in the discomfort. When you stay in that space, the psyche of the other begins to shift. You're no longer reacting, you're leading. Now take this further. Reframe their perception of reality. Change the way they see a situation, and make them view it in a way that aligns with your outcome. This is where we move into a more subtle but incredibly powerful form of influence. True control doesn't lie in forcing someone to act. It lies in making them see the world in a way that favors your goals. And that is precisely what reframing does. People don't respond to objective facts. They react to the meaning those facts carry. If you can alter the way someone interprets a situation, you can influence their behavior without ever pushing them. The key lies in redefining the emotional or psychological significance of what they perceive. Give them a new lens through which to view the moment, one that naturally leads them to the conclusion you want. For example, if someone complains that a task is too hard, don't contradict them. Say, "That's not a burden, it's a test." The ones who overcome challenges like this are the ones who end up with the power. Suddenly, it's no longer a problem. Now, it's an opportunity to grow. You haven't forced them to accept the task. You've given it new meaning. And when someone believes something is their choice, they defend it more fiercely. Another example, if someone is hesitant to take an action that benefits you, don't argue. Don't try to persuade. Change the frame. Instead of saying, "You should do it," say, "People with vision, don't let chances like this pass." You're not asking for anything. You've created a reality where the only rational option is action. This principle is used in marketing, politics, and high-level persuasion. The media doesn't tell you what to think. They tell you how to interpret what you're already seeing. And once you control someone's interpretation, you control their emotional and behavioral response. Use this consciously in your conversations. If someone is perceiving something in a way that doesn't benefit you, don't oppose it directly. Reframe their perception, offer a new meaning, and watch how their response changes without them ever realizing why. As Jung might say, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. When you alter someone's internal framework, you alter the external world they believe they're living in. The one who defines the frame defines the reality. Now let's raise the level again. This next technique goes beyond perception. It subtly shapes decision-making itself. It's called the illusion of choice. When done skillfully, it leads someone to your desired outcome without them realizing they were guided there. When you offer someone a limited set of options, all of which serve your interest, they feel in control, while you quietly steer the direction. People resist being forced, but when they feel like they're choosing freely, they'll embrace what they might otherwise reject. The illusion of choice involves giving alternatives that are strategically crafted so that no matter what they choose, the end result benefits you. A simple example: instead of asking, "Do you want to do this?" ask, "Would you prefer to do this now or in an hour?" The first gives them a chance to say no. The second keeps you in control. Another, more advanced case: if you want someone to accept a proposal, don't offer just one path. Give them two options, but both inside your zone of benefit. You might say, "We can go with the standard version or the premium. Which one works better for you?" In their mind, they've already agreed. They're just choosing the format. This strategy is used in sales, negotiation, and leadership. Political figures apply it when they offer choices that all lead to the same destination. Business leaders use it to make you feel like you've made a free decision, when in truth, you've simply picked from a curated set of options. The secret is this: never let the person see beyond the boundaries you've defined. Jung emphasized the power of the unconscious in guiding our decisions. What we perceive as choice is often the product of deeper, unseen influences. When you construct the frame and the apparent options within it, you shape the unconscious narrative the other person follows. That is influence at its highest form. The trick isn't domination. It's subtle psychological guidance. Don't demand. Don't pressure. Simply present a world where every road leads exactly where you want it to. The person may feel they're walking their own path, but in truth, you've drawn the map. If you want someone to do something, don't offer them a direct refusal point. Instead, shape the dialogue in a way that they believe they're making the decision freely, when in truth, they are walking directly toward the outcome you intended from the start. When you guide the perception of choice, you steer the outcome. This is not mere manipulation. It's an understanding of how the unconscious mind seeks safety in agency. People feel at ease when they believe they're in control, even if they're responding to impulses seated deep within the psyche. When you alter a person's expectations, you alter their reality. Once those expectations shift, they will accept what they previously resisted. This is where control moves to a much deeper psychological layer. If you succeed in adjusting someone's internal frame of reference, you can lead them to embrace possibilities they would have never previously entertained. Carl Jung spoke often of how perception is not a mirror of reality, but a projection of the inner world. Control that inner lens, and you shift the entire landscape. The key lies in contrast. Present something extreme at first, difficult, overwhelming, even absurd. Then offer what you truly wanted from the beginning. Compared to the first option, your real desire now seems mild, even reasonable. This is known as psychological contrast. By asking for something excessive first, then appearing to make a concession, you seem accommodating, while in reality, you've merely guided the psyche to the endpoint you intended all along. Say you want someone to agree to a favor. Start by asking for something far greater. When they decline, follow with your true request. That second ask will now feel far more acceptable in comparison. Corporations do this constantly. They present the most expensive product first, then a slightly cheaper option that still costs a lot. But now, it feels like a bargain. Skilled negotiators open with exaggerated demands, only to compromise down to what they actually wanted. This contrast reshapes desire and logic alike. Another layer to this is the manipulation of perceived value. If you condition someone to expect very little, then give slightly more, it will seem like a gift. A person used to minimal attention, when offered just a little more, may feel overwhelmed with gratitude. In truth, you've offered very little. The illusion lies in the shift of expectation, not in the substance. This is the essence of how the unconscious compares new input with past experiences. Set the reference point, and you control the emotional impact. Try this in any conversation or negotiation. Don't make your actual request immediately. First, introduce a more demanding alternative. Then ask for what you truly want. The human mind does not evaluate in absolutes. It evaluates in relation to what came before. Shape that sequence, and you shape the choice. When you control the comparison, you guide the decision without resistance. Now, we move into a deeper current, one that touches the inner mechanisms of attachment, reward, and psychological dependency. Carl Jung often noted that the human psyche is drawn to mystery, to the unknown. This next technique uses that same instinct, intermittent reinforcement. It creates emotional addiction not through consistency, but through unpredictability. It is the foundation of all toxic dynamics, relationships, ideologies, even digital platforms. Intermittent reinforcement works by alternating attention and withdrawal. You give presence, then pull away. The key is never to offer your validation as something predictable. The psyche doesn't attach to certainty. It attaches to what is uncertain. When you are always available in the same way, the unconscious adapts and grows indifferent. But when you shift between intimacy and distance, the inner child awakens, hungry, searching, obsessive. The brain enters a loop of anxiety and longing, chasing what was once given freely but is now withheld. This is how gambling works. It's how social media keeps us hooked. They don't reward us consistently. They shift between stimulation and emptiness, keeping us in a state of anticipation. We begin to crave not what is, but what might be. The fantasy replaces the truth. The projection becomes stronger than reality. This is how you get someone to think about you without even realizing why. If they're used to immediate replies, start delaying them. If they're used to constant praise, take it away for a while, then return it in small, controlled amounts. That uncertainty plants the seed of obsession. As Jung observed, the unconscious seeks symbols, signs, and meaning in chaos. Intermittent reinforcement becomes the symbolic chaos that the mind can't stop decoding. When you use this technique, the other person never quite feels they have you. And because they never possess you, they continue seeking you. It is not abundance that generates longing, but managed scarcity. Scarcity awakens desire. It activates the archetype of the seeker. What is easily attained loses value. What is withheld becomes sacred. The deeper truth is this: we are not addicted to presence. We are addicted to the mystery of its absence. If you want someone to remain connected to you, don't offer them everything right away. Let them earn it. And once they do, allow them to feel they could lose it at any moment. The one who controls validation controls the psyche. According to Carl Jung, the human mind is shaped not only by external forces, but by the unconscious need for meaning, approval, and belonging. This is where the implantation of ideas begins. Make them believe the idea was their own. That is the highest form of influence, not commanding someone to act, but leading them to believe that the decision was born from within. When an individual feels they've reached a conclusion on their own, they will defend it with far more passion than they ever would defend an imposed directive. This is because the ego is deeply invested in the illusion of autonomy. Here lies the essence of subtle influence. Not to dictate or overtly suggest, but to guide thought delicately. You must plant the seed of an idea without them noticing, steering the interaction so that the other person arrives, seemingly of their own accord, at the conclusion you wanted all along. Rather than saying, "You should do this," ask reflective questions. What if you tried this instead? Or, how do you think it would feel if you made that choice? Or even, if someone were in your position, what might they do? With these questions, you're not offering instructions. You're activating their internal dialogue, what Jung might describe as prompting a confrontation with the self. You're drawing the answer from the unconscious, allowing their shadow to speak, while making them believe it's purely conscious reasoning. Another effective method is the principle of repeated exposure. Introduce a concept during different conversations, at separate moments, and casually. When an idea is heard multiple times without direct resistance, the mind begins to process it beneath awareness. Jung observed that the unconscious often accepts what is familiar, and the human mind, in its search for order, begins to associate familiarity with truth. Media, marketing, and mass persuasion rely on this principle. The more often something is heard or seen, the more natural it feels, even if it's false. So if you want someone to believe or do something, don't command it. Plant the seed gently and let their unconscious nurture it. Eventually, they'll act on what they believe was their own idea. They'll move in your direction, not because they were pushed, but because they chose to walk there. True control doesn't feel like control. It feels like free will. I've shared 7 subtle techniques with you. They are effective, but still gentle. Yes, they work, but they barely scratch the surface of what's truly possible. Once you begin to master the art of influence, you'll discover far deeper, darker, and more dangerous techniques. These advanced methods don't just sway decisions, they reshape entire thought patterns. They can align someone's mind to your will without them ever questioning it. But such tools are not for everyone. They are powerful and ethically dangerous, and not all are ready to use them. If you want me to reveal those techniques, prove it. Like this video and leave a comment. Only when I see that there's real interest in learning more will I unveil the next level. Because knowledge is power, but only for those willing to wield it. In the end, it all comes down to this. Control has nothing to do with force. It has everything to do with perception. It's not about making others obey. It's about guiding them to choose what you already intended. And as Carl Jung understood so clearly, he who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. Whoever masters the mind, masterfully, silently, masters the world.
God, in His infinite wisdom, finds unique and profound ways to communicate with us. Often, it is not through a clear voice or an obvious message, but rather through a soul connection that resonates deep within our minds and souls. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human unconscious, firmly believed that there is something divine and transformative in the signs we receive through our minds. For Jung, the unconscious was not merely a place where our fears and repressed desires were hidden. It was also a sacred space where the divine seeks to speak to us. Imagine for a moment that your worries, your dreams, your intuitions, and even the chaotic moments in your life are not mere coincidences. Jung taught that every symbol and every emotion appearing in our minds is a message that deserves to be heard. However, we live in an era where ignoring these signs has become the norm. We are constantly distracted by external noise, searching for answers in the wrong places while our souls cry out for attention. But what if we started paying attention? What if we understood that God is using our minds as a channel to guide us toward our best selves? According to Jung, the human mind is a map of two distinct territories, the conscious and the unconscious. In the conscious realm, we find our daily decisions, our routines, and everything we recognize as normal. However, the unconscious is the home of a vaster and more mysterious universe, one where what Jung called the shadow dwells, alongside our intuitions and the archetypes that shape our lives. This unconscious is our connection to something far greater than ourselves, something that transcends our limited understanding. The connection with the divine. Perhaps you have felt that disconnection at some point. The gap between what you do and what you truly desire. That emptiness that, even when surrounded by success or comfort, still seems impossible to fill. Jung maintained that this feeling is a wake-up call. It is your soul, your unconscious, pleading with you to stop and listen. Because behind that emptiness, there is a message, one that only you can decipher if you are willing to face your shadows and explore the deepest corners of your mind. On the journey of life, we all face moments of uncertainty. Often, we cling to what we know, avoiding looking inward for fear of what we might find. But Jung taught us that true growth occurs when we stop fearing our shadows and begin to integrate them. These shadows, those parts of ourselves that we prefer to ignore, contain immense transformative power. By confronting them, we not only discover who we truly are, but also open the door to communication with the divine. Every decision you make, every relationship you choose, is influenced by what resides in your unconscious. Jung said that what we are unable to integrate into our conscious minds manifests externally as fate. This means that if you ignore your fears, your deepest desires, and your intuitions, you will eventually face them in the form of obstacles, failures, or conflicting relationships. But when you choose to listen to yourself, when you allow those internal messages to guide your life, something changes. Your external reality begins to align with your inner truth. Many people wonder why they experience the same patterns over and over again, why they end up in relationships that do not fulfill them, in jobs that do not satisfy them, or in cycles of self-destruction. The answer, according to Jung, lies in the unconscious. These patterns are your mind's way of trying to get your attention, to make you aware of something you are ignoring. They are reminders that until you confront your shadow and reconcile with it, you will continue repeating the same lessons. God, in His infinite patience, uses these very patterns to speak to us. It is not a punishment. It is an invitation to pause, to reflect, and to ask yourself, what do I need to learn from this experience? What part of myself am I ignoring? When you accept this invitation, when you decide to face yourself with courage, you begin to discover a peace and clarity that once seemed unattainable. The unconscious is not merely a hidden reservoir of suppressed thoughts and forgotten memories. It is also the sacred chamber where our greatest treasures reside, our gifts, our creativity, and our divine purpose. For Carl Jung, each of us carries a unique path, a calling deeply inscribed within the very core of our soul. However, to uncover it, we must be willing to listen. And listening does not simply mean paying attention to external words or signs. It requires tuning into that silent voice within us, the one that resonates deep inside, offering guidance, comfort in moments of despair, and the strength to keep moving forward when all seems lost. The process of hearing this inner voice can be challenging, especially in a world that constantly pushes us to seek answers outside ourselves. Yet, Jung insisted that true knowledge is not found in books or in the advice of others. It emerges from an intimate connection with our unconscious. This connection forms a bridge between the human and the divine, a sacred space where God whispers to us through symbols, emotions, and synchronicities. Synchronicity, one of Jung's most fascinating concepts, reveals itself when seemingly unrelated events take on profound meaning in our lives. These moments are not mere coincidences. They are messages, signs from the universe or the divine, affirming that we are on the right path. Perhaps you have experienced thinking about someone only for that person to unexpectedly call you. Or maybe you keep seeing a specific number, phrase, or symbol repeatedly, as if it were following you. These are not random occurrences. They are signals, an invitation to pay closer attention. However, many people dismiss these experiences because they seem too abstract or difficult to rationalize. But Jung reminds us that the soul does not communicate in logical or analytical terms. It speaks in metaphors, images, and feelings. When we ignore these signs, we are not only cutting ourselves off from the divine, but also from our own true essence. This is why learning to recognize and honor moments of synchronicity is crucial. They serve as a reminder that we are not alone, that a higher force is guiding and supporting us along our journey. On this path of self-discovery, we constantly face a formidable challenge, the ego. While the ego is essential for our sense of identity, it can become a major obstacle when it takes control of our lives. It is the ego that resists change, fears the unknown, and seeks to control every aspect of our existence. Jung believed that true fulfillment could only be achieved by transcending the ego. However, this does not mean eliminating it entirely, but rather integrating it, allowing it to become a servant of the soul rather than its master. The ego fears vulnerability because it perceives change as a threat. Yet, in truth, change is the gateway to growth. When we allow our masks to fall, when we are honest with ourselves about our struggles and fears, we create space for the divine to enter our lives. It is in those moments of humility that we find the answers we have been seeking. Jung also introduced the concept of archetypes, universal patterns that dwell within the collective unconscious. These archetypes serve as spiritual guides, helping us navigate the challenges of life. Among them is the wise sage, who urges us to seek truth beyond mere appearances, and the hero, who pushes us to confront our fears and overcome our limitations. Every time you feel the impulse to explore, to question, or to transform, it is an archetype at work in your life. Some may wonder how these seemingly abstract archetypes can have such a profound impact on our lives. The answer lies in the immense power of symbolism. Symbols are the language of the soul, and each archetype represents a symbol of our highest potential. By connecting with them, we not only discover who we are, but also who we can become. However, to truly connect with these archetypes, we must be willing to face our shadows. The shadow, as we mentioned before, is not something to be feared. It is a part of us that longs to be acknowledged, integrated, and healed. When we deny our shadow, it finds ways to manifest, whether through conflicts, illnesses, or destructive patterns. But when we choose to face it with courage, we discover that it is not an enemy, but rather an ally that pushes us toward transformation. The journey toward shadow integration is, at its core, an act of self-love. It means accepting yourself in your entirety, with all your virtues and flaws. It is about understanding that your mistakes do not define you, that your failures are lessons, and that even your fears have a purpose. This level of acceptance not only transforms your relationship with yourself, but also with others. Because when you allow yourself to be authentic, you inspire others to do the same. At this point, you might be wondering, how do I begin this journey? The answer lies in introspection. Take time to reflect on your emotions, your patterns, and your dreams. Listen to that inner voice you often ignore. Ask yourself, what is this experience trying to tell me? What can I learn from this situation? And most importantly, have the courage to act accordingly. Because understanding alone is not enough. True change occurs when you take action. When you start listening to your inner voice and aligning your actions with it, something extraordinary happens. Your life begins to transform in ways you never imagined. The right people appear at the right moment. Opportunities align, and situations that once seemed confusing begin to make sense. This is neither magic nor coincidence. It is a result of living in harmony with your inner truth. Jung called this process individuation, which is nothing more than the path toward integrating all parts of yourself. It is a journey where you become who you are truly meant to be, freeing yourself from external expectations and embracing your authenticity. Individuation does not mean perfection. It means wholeness. It is the ability to accept both your light and your shadow, to embrace your strengths and also your vulnerabilities. On this path, trials and challenges are inevitable, but every obstacle you face has a purpose. It is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to strengthen your connection with the divine. Perhaps you have gone through moments where you felt like everything was falling apart. But even in those moments of pain, there is a hidden lesson. Jung believed that suffering is not a punishment, but a tool for awakening our consciousness. It is a call to look inward, to face what we have been avoiding. Suffering, though uncomfortable, can be a powerful teacher. It teaches us to let go of what no longer serves us, to release the expectations we have imposed on ourselves, and to trust that something better awaits us on the other side of pain. When you choose to confront suffering instead of running from it, you discover a strength you never knew you had. And that strength is what allows you to move forward toward a more authentic and meaningful life. Another crucial aspect of the journey toward wholeness is the significance of community. While inner work is deeply personal, it is not meant to be done in isolation. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, an energetic field that connects us with all human beings, past and present, shaping our thoughts, emotions, and even the way we perceive reality. This means that our experiences are never isolated. They are interwoven with those of others in profound and often unseen ways. When you share your truth, when you speak from the depths of your heart with sincerity and vulnerability, you create a sacred space where others feel safe to do the same. In this exchange, you not only find support and inspiration, but you also experience a powerful sense of connection, one that reminds you that you are part of something far greater than yourself. The bonds you cultivate with others do not merely strengthen you. They serve as living proof that life itself is an intricate web of relationships, each one carrying the potential to shape you and be shaped by you. Every interaction, every relationship you nurture becomes an opportunity for transformation, for both your own evolution and the growth of those around you. Even difficult relationships, those that test your patience, challenge your boundaries, or stir deep emotional wounds, hold a profound purpose. They act as mirrors, reflecting the hidden aspects of yourself that require healing, attention, or integration. Rather than resisting these relationships, Jung would encourage you to ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? What part of me is seeking to be acknowledged or transformed? When you embrace each interaction as a lesson rather than a burden, you shift from a mindset of victimhood to one of empowerment. You begin to understand that the people who cross your path, whether they stay for a moment or a lifetime, are part of a divine design, a cosmic blueprint created to help you step into the fullest expression of yourself. This level of awareness does not only transform your relationships, it reshapes your entire outlook on life. The perspective you choose to adopt determines the reality you experience. If you interpret challenges as punishments or failures, you will find yourself trapped in a never-ending cycle of suffering, resentment, and self-doubt. However, if you view those same challenges as opportunities for expansion and self-discovery, you will realize that even the most painful experiences carry hidden wisdom and meaning. Jung reminds us that the mind is an extraordinarily powerful tool, one capable of shaping our reality in ways we often underestimate. When you shift your thoughts, you shift your world. But such transformation does not happen overnight. It demands practice, patience, and an unwavering commitment to your personal growth. It means waking up every morning with the conscious intention to be just a little more aware, a little more authentic, and a little more aligned with both your inner truth and the divine intelligence that flows through all things. It is a journey, a continuous unfolding, where each step brings you closer to a state of wholeness. Wholeness is not a final destination. It is a way of being. It is the deep inner peace that arises when you live in alignment with your truth, when you no longer seek external validation, but instead find contentment in simply being who you are. It is the liberation that comes from shedding the fear of judgment and embracing your most authentic self without apology. And most importantly, It is a sacred connection to the divine that has always existed within you, waiting to be rediscovered. When you choose to live from the space of authenticity and alignment, your entire reality begins to shift. Miracles start to unfold before your eyes. Doors that once seemed permanently closed begin to open effortlessly. The right people, the ones who uplift, inspire, and support your journey, appear at exactly the right moment. The opportunities you have been longing for materialize in the most unexpected ways. None of this is mere coincidence. It is the natural outcome of being in harmony with your purpose, of stepping fully into the life that was always meant for you. It is the manifestation of divine grace in action. As you progress on this path toward fulfillment, you realize that everything you need to transform your life is already within you. It is not about accumulating more external knowledge or seeking validation from the outside world. It is about remembering who you truly are and allowing that truth to guide every aspect of your existence. This process, though challenging, is profoundly liberating. It is like waking up from a long and confusing dream and finally seeing life with clarity. Carl Jung believed that within each of us lies an unlimited potential, an authentic self waiting to be discovered. But to access this self, we must be willing to let go of the illusions and limitations we have built throughout our lives. These limitations are often rooted in fear, the fear of rejection, failure, or even success. However, when you choose to face these fears and act from a place of courage, you realize that they are merely shadows that disappear when illuminated by the light of your truth. A crucial part of this journey involves freeing yourself from beliefs that no longer serve you. Jung stated that many of our beliefs are inherited, absorbed from our family, culture, or society, and often do not reflect our true essence. Ask yourself, what beliefs am I holding that are not mine? What ideas about myself or the world are limiting me? When you begin to question these beliefs, you open the door to new possibilities, to a way of living that aligns with who you truly are. Introspection, the practice of looking within, is a powerful tool for this kind of work. Take time each day to sit in silence, to listen to your inner voice, and to reflect on your thoughts and emotions. You do not need to have all the answers immediately. The simple act of paying attention to what is happening within you is a step toward transformation. Often, the answers you seek will come in unexpected ways. Perhaps in a dream, an intuition, or even a seemingly casual conversation. Jung also emphasized the importance of dreams as a channel of communication between the conscious and the unconscious. Dreams are not just random images. They are symbolic messages from your soul, designed to help you understand aspects of yourself and your life that need attention. If you start paying attention to your dreams, writing them down and reflecting on them, you will discover a world of wisdom that is always available to you. The process of interpreting your dreams does not require expertise. It is enough to observe the emotions, symbols, and stories that emerge. Ask yourself, what is this dream trying to tell me? What emotions does it evoke? How can I apply its message to my life? By doing this, you will strengthen your connection with your subconscious and, consequently, with the divine. On this journey toward authenticity, it is essential to remember that you are not alone. Although inner work is deeply personal, there are always guides, teachers, and companions along the way who are there to support you. Sometimes, these guides appear in the form of people, books, or even videos like this one. Other times, they arrive as intuitions or moments of clarity that seem to emerge from nowhere. But in reality, these moments are manifestations of divine grace, reminding you that you are being guided and supported at all times. According to Jung, divine grace is not something we must seek outside ourselves. It is an energy present in every moment of our lives, a force that connects us to something greater than ourselves. When you allow this grace to flow through you, you begin to see life from a completely different perspective. Challenges no longer feel like punishments, but rather opportunities for growth. Difficult relationships become mirrors reflecting what you need to heal, and moments of uncertainty transform into portals leading to new possibilities. The key to allowing this grace to flow is trust. trusting that everything happening in your life has a purpose, even if you cannot see it at the moment. Trust that you are being guided towards something better, even when the path seems dark or uncertain. And above all, trust that within you lies a force, a light that can never be extinguished. When you choose to live from this trust, something incredible happens. Your life becomes filled with meaning. Every day, every interaction, and every experience turns into an opportunity to learn, grow, and share your light with the world. And in doing so, you not only transform your own life, but also inspire others to do the same. This is the power of living in alignment with your truth. It is a power that not only reshapes your reality, but also has the potential to transform the world around you. Because when you choose to be authentic, when you allow the divine to express itself through you, you become a beacon of light for others. And in a world that often feels full of darkness, that light is more necessary than ever. As you move forward on this journey of self-discovery, you begin to realize that every step you take not only transforms your life, but also impacts those around you. Carl Jung taught us that personal growth is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of service to the world. When you choose to live in alignment with your truth, when you allow divine light to shine through you, you become an inspiration for others. Your authenticity and your connection to the divine have the power to illuminate the path for those who, just like you once did, are searching for their way. Think about the impact you can have by sharing your story, by showing the world that it is possible to live from a place of fulfillment and connection. Every time you choose to speak from the heart, every time you act from your truth, you are creating a space for others to do the same. It is a ripple effect that starts with you but has the potential to reach countless people. At this moment, I invite you to reflect. What can you do today to connect more deeply with your truth? What steps can you take to integrate the lessons you have learned? And most importantly, how can you share that light with the world? Remember, it is not about perfection, but about intention. Every small gesture, every sincere word, and every authentic action has the power to transform lives, starting with your own. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to take one more step. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these words, someone who is looking for a sign, a guide, or a spark of inspiration. Your action can not only be the beginning of a transformation for that person, but also help this message reach more hearts around the world. Let me know in the comments which part of this message touched your soul. Share your reflections, your experiences, and your insights. Every comment, every interaction is an opportunity to build a community of people committed to their authenticity, growth, and divine connection. Your words have the power to inspire others, to touch lives, and to create an impact far beyond what you can imagine.
Let's say it without sugarcoating it, but without raising our voice. What you're about to hear isn't a scream, it's a whisper that pierces deeper than any noise ever could. Don't open your eyes just yet. Don't look around searching for answers. Look within, because right there, in the darkest corner of your mind, the place no one enters, the place you yourself fear to peek into, that's where this story begins. There, hidden beneath layers of appearances and silence, echoes a single question you've been avoiding for far too long. Who are you when they strip away the mask of composure? When that forced smile finally collapses? When tension bursts inside you like a silent explosion and no one even notices? What remains of you? Have you lived your life believing that control is strength? That calm is something you learn from self-help books or pretty quotes on social media? If so, you've been misled. True control isn't something you study or rehearse. It awakens. It reveals itself in the moments that test your very core. And for many, it never does, because keeping calm isn't a technique. It's a trial. It's standing at the edge of the abyss, looking straight into the chaos without blinking. And here's the strange part. You have no idea how often you've been right on that edge. You've walked the razor's edge of your own sanity more times than you could count, completely unaware. It's those arguments that don't end in shouting, but in endless distances. It's those loaded glances, heavy with restrained rage. It's the silence, where everything is being said, and yet nothing is spoken. Carl Jung didn't speak of calm as a simple virtue. To him, it was a sign, an echo from the soul that has embraced its own shadow. Because while you run from conflict, there's a part of you that feeds it, that craves it. And if I'm being honest, that part of you isn't asleep. It's wide awake, very awake, but you pretend. You pretend to be blind, deaf, neutral. You convince yourself that nothing touches you, that everything can be reasoned, that you're an island in the middle of the storm. But Jung knew no one is an island. We are all battlefields, and right now, you're losing the war without even realizing it. Do you want to know why you explode when someone interrupts you? Why you break into a cold sweat at the slightest criticism, even though you're smiling? Why your thoughts turn into blades when someone makes you feel small? It's because you don't know how to be at peace with yourself. Because you confuse calm with repression. Because you've spent years silencing your shadow instead of integrating it. And what you repress doesn't disappear. It grows stronger, more dangerous, more desperate to be seen. This video isn't here to teach you how to breathe deeply, or to repeat mantras, or to sip green tea while imagining that the universe is conspiring in your favor. This video is a mirror, one of those that doesn't distort what it reflects, one that shows you the part of yourself that can't be posted on Instagram, the part that trembles, that burns, that swallows words, tasting like blood. Do you really want to remain calm in the face of confrontation? Then prepare to die, not physically, but psychologically, because you'll have to kill that version of yourself that gets dragged around by rage disguised as reason. That version that defends itself by attacking, that screams so it doesn't get devoured, that constantly justifies itself because it doesn't know how to stay silent. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And do you know what your fate is if you do nothing? To always react like an animal, like a victim of your most primal instincts. True power doesn't lie in defeating others. It lies in not letting others defeat you from within. This is not just another video about self-esteem. It's not another piece of content meant to make you feel good for 5 minutes, only to explode again on the ones you love the most. This is a descent, and not everyone comes back from it. Because not everyone is willing to face what they carry inside. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is tired. Tired of pretending everything is fine. Tired of making excuses. Tired of losing control precisely when you need it the most. Today, you're not stepping into the labyrinth because I say so. You're stepping in because your soul is already there, wandering, calling out for you to finally show up and face it. So don't look away. Don't try to calm yourself. Don't breathe deeply in an attempt to soothe the discomfort. Do the exact opposite. Let yourself feel the vertigo, the tension, the uneasiness pressing on your chest, because that very discomfort is the doorway. And whether you like it or not, you're about to walk through it. Are you ready to meet the version of yourself that shows up when stillness is the only thing standing between you and the abyss? Don't leave just yet. If you think that the real danger lies in your anger, then you're still missing the core of the problem. Anger is just the tip of the iceberg. The real fire, the one that burns everything down, begins long before you raise your voice. It begins in silence, in those moments when you betray yourself quietly, when you say, "It's fine," even though every part of you is screaming that it's not. When you say yes to things you don't want, when you compromise your boundaries, when you swallow your truth again and again, once, twice, 100 times, until that false calmness turns into a ticking time bomb that no one sees coming. And then when the explosion happens, they ask you, why did you lash out like that? Why did you overreact? Why did you say something so out of line? But what no one ever asks is, how long had you been pretending everything was okay? Can you see it now? The people who boast the most about having self-control are often just one small trigger away from collapsing. Because their calm is a mask, a carefully constructed illusion. And the most dangerous thing about a mask is that it even fools the one who's wearing it. Carl Jung once said, "The self is a necessary mask," but he also warned that if you identify too closely with that mask, you lose touch with who you are underneath. And that's exactly what happens every time you choose calmness, not as a triumph, but as a disguise. Do you understand now? This isn't about suppressing your emotions. This is about integrating them. This is about realizing that your anger, your fear, your impulsive urges, they're not enemies, they're messengers. They are fractured parts of you that have been silenced, overlooked, neglected. People don't lose control during confrontation because they're weak. They lose control because they're carrying an unresolved war inside of them, a war that no one on the outside can see. And often, it's a war they themselves have stopped listening to. And here's a truth that may sting. Most of your confrontations aren't with others. They're with yourself. Every time you stay silent when you want to speak. Every time you agree to something that wounds you. Every time you smile just to keep the peace. You're not avoiding conflict, you're creating it inside yourself. And those are the confrontations that do the most damage because they're invisible. No one sees them, but you feel them, you carry them. And one day, without knowing how or why, you find yourself irritated by everything. You don't understand why small things make you explode, why you're exhausted, resentful, anxious. You say you want peace? Start there. Stop running from your small internal wars. Face them. Because what you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It rots. And what rots eventually erupts in the worst ways. And now we come to something else no one likes to admit. There's always that one person. That one type of person who pushes your buttons like no one else. That one personality that triggers your ugliest shadows, your deepest rage, your worst instincts. That's not a coincidence. That person is a mirror. They reflect something inside you that you haven't resolved yet. It's not really about them. It's about what they awaken in you. Maybe they represent the voice that shamed you as a child, the authority that silenced you, the rejection that broke you, the betrayal you never healed from. Maybe they act freely in the way you've never allowed yourself to. Maybe they expose the boundaries you've never learned to defend. Either way, they show you what you still haven't made peace with. And that's why you react with such intensity. Not because they're powerful, but because they touch a wound that's still open. And that's the invitation here. Not to keep pretending you're fine. Not to chase an artificial version of calm. But to walk into the fire of your own truth. To confront the parts of you that are tired of being ignored. Because real peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from integration, from listening to what hurts, from giving space to what you feel, from understanding that your emotions aren't flaws, they're signals, they're sacred messengers guiding you back to yourself. So stay with the discomfort, stay with the tension. Let it teach you, let it guide you, because that's where the healing begins, not in the silence, but in the courage to finally break it. It might be someone who dominates you, who makes you feel small, or someone who manipulates you, who makes you doubt yourself. Pay close attention. Every confrontation that shakes your balance is a mirror, and the more uncomfortable it makes you, the more it reveals a part of yourself that you refuse to face. Don't resist that discomfort. Use it. Follow the thread. Trace it back to its origin. Because the real enemy is never the other person. The real enemy is the echo that person activates inside you. Now let me ask you something. How many times have you won an argument only to feel empty afterward? How many times have you had the final word and yet still lost your peace of mind? That's what happens when you walk into a confrontation without truly knowing yourself. It's not a battle of ideas. It's a clash of wounded egos, yours and theirs. And in that kind of war, even the winner loses. Because true calm cannot be imposed. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot be performed. It can only be reached. And you reach it only when you no longer feel the need to prove anything. When you've made peace with the darkest corners of yourself. Let's talk about silence now. But not the superficial kind of silence. The real one, the internal one. Silence that has nothing to do with keeping your mouth shut, and everything to do with not reacting internally. Because true calm doesn't start on your lips. It starts in your judgment. Do you know how hard it is to witness a provocation and not immediately assign it a meaning? To face someone's aggression and not interpret it as a personal attack? That's where true strength is forged. When you learn to create space between what happens and how you choose to feel about it, that space, that brief second of separation, is where your freedom lives. And yes, it's difficult. You've been trained to react, not to respond. You live in a culture that glorifies speed, clever comebacks, and sharp retorts. But the sharpest mind is not the one that speaks first. It's the one that doesn't rush, the one that doesn't fall into the trap laid by others. Carl Jung once said, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." And waking up hurts, because you begin to see everything you used to avoid. You see your pride. You see your need to always be right. You see your old wound, the one that cries out every time you feel unheard. You begin to notice the root of your anxiety hiding in every argument. But you also start to see something more, something you can actually choose. And that choice, that conscious decision not to feed the storm, that is the closest thing to real power. Do you want proof that you're growing? Look at how you react when someone falsely accuses you, when someone misinterprets you, when someone mocks you. Do you immediately jump to your own defense? Do you raise your voice so that your truth can be heard? Or can you remain grounded without needing to convince anyone of anything? That's where your growth is measured, not by what you achieve, but by what you no longer feel the need to prove. And now, let's go deeper into another shadowy place. Your need to stay calm. So often, that calm doesn't come from wisdom. It comes from fear. Fear of being rejected. Fear of seeming weak. Fear of not being enough. And so you become an actor, a flawless performer of serenity. But inside, you're screaming. What would happen if you stopped performing? If, for the first time, you stopped trying to prove anything? If you simply allowed yourself to feel exactly what you feel, and observe it without judgment. Not to control it, but to understand it, to name it. Because the problem is not feeling anger. The problem is not knowing what to do with it. This is the core of it all. Emotional management is not about repression, nor is it about spilling everything without filter. It's about understanding. And in order to understand yourself, you must stop lying to yourself. You must stop saying you're fine when you're not. You must stop using calmness as an excuse to avoid the conflicts you actually need to face. Not every confrontation is bad. Some are essential. Some actually save you. Some are the only way to set boundaries. And boundaries, whether people like them or not, are one of the purest forms of self-love. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, don't think of staying calm like it's some performance for the outside world. Ask yourself, is my calm a way of avoiding myself, or is it a way of affirming myself? Because there's a calm that is submission, and another that is mastery. And only you can decide which one you're practicing. And no, we're not done yet. There's something else. Something no one really tells you. Keeping your composure in the middle of confrontation isn't always about having the right words. Sometimes it's about knowing when to leave. Because there are battles that are never meant to be won by fighting. They're won by walking away. Not because you're running, but because you've grown. Because you finally realized that not every conflict deserves your energy. Some confrontations exist for one reason only, to steal your presence. And when you learn how to walk away without drama, you're not losing. You're choosing to protect your essence. And you know what's the most powerful part of all this? That some people will mistake your calm for weakness until they realize you're the only one in the room who doesn't need to raise their voice to own the space. This isn't about applause. This isn't about being better than anyone else. This is about real self-control. And real self-control isn't rigidity. It's conscious flexibility. It's moving like water, strong but fluid, grounded but flowing. Because like Bruce Lee said, be water, my friend. And no, that wasn't a marketing line. That was a warning. Those who don't learn how to flow, break. But you didn't come here to break. You came here to wake up. And if you're still listening, that's not by accident. Something in you chose to stay. Not out of boredom, not out of habit, but because this message touched a layer most people avoid. We're no longer talking about just staying calm. We're talking about transforming your entire existence. Because calm, that's just the surface. What you're really learning is to not sell your soul, to not trade your inner peace for the cheap hit of a reactive emotion. You're training the invisible muscle of awareness, the one no one sees, but it holds everything together. And here comes the most powerful part. When you change the way you respond to conflict, conflict changes the way it shows up in your life. It's almost like the universe takes notice, like the battles begin to avoid you, not because you're afraid, but because you're no longer fuel for chaos. The fire can't burn what no longer ignites. Will there still be confrontation? Absolutely. But now, you won't be available to be dragged into it. Not because you think you're superior, but because you know yourself more deeply. Because you've gone into your own darkness and come back with something that can't be bought, can't be acted, and can't be faked. Presence. And that changes everything. Calm is not the destination. It's a sign that you've awakened, that you no longer react from your wounds, but from your choices, that you don't move from fear anymore, but from direction. And do you know what that makes you? Dangerous. Dangerous to manipulators, dangerous to chaos seekers, dangerous to those who thrive on noise, because now you are silence that cuts, presence that weighs heavy, peace that makes others uncomfortable. When someone who's integrated their shadow sits across from you and doesn't flinch, something inside others starts to tremble. They don't know why, but they feel it, because that calm isn't weakness. It's the echo of someone who has died and come back, wiser, deeper, untouchable. So here's the ending. If something like this can even have an end, don't stay calm for others. Don't do it to keep things easy. Don't do it to look strong. Do it for you, because you no longer need to explode to feel alive, because you no longer need to win to feel worthy, because you no longer need to be right to be at peace. And if someone doesn't understand that, let them go. Not everyone is ready for the kind of serenity that confronts and disarms. If this message resonated with you, don't just leave like it meant nothing. This channel isn't for people who just want feel-good fluff. This is for those ready to leave behind the weak, programmed, tamed version of themselves and step fully into transformation. Subscribe now if you're ready to keep digging into truths that might be uncomfortable, but will set you free. And hit the notification bell, because what's coming next, you won't want to miss. And if you want to leave a mark, comment below. Silence is my armor. Awareness is my sword. That's how I'll know you made it all the way here. That you're not just one more voice in the crowd. And now, yes, I'm signing off, but not with a goodbye. That'd be too predictable. I'm leaving you with a warning. From today on, be careful what you think right before you react. Because now, you know. Now, you've seen it. And once you've seen it, there's no going back. The real confrontation doesn't happen out there. It happens within. And once that starts, the calm you conquer is irreversible. I'll see you when no one else dares to look. In the shadow, at the edge, in the depth. Until next time. Have you ever wondered why sometimes, even when surrounded by people, silence seems to scream louder? Have you felt that the conversations around you no longer touch anything that truly matters? Behind the smiles and polite gestures lies nothing more than a subtle theater sustained by the fear of being alone. Carl Jung once said that trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The search for understanding who we are often leads us to the paradox of losing everything that no longer resonates with truth. And Nietzsche whispered a warning to the world that few truly listen to. When you stare long into the abyss also gazes back at you. Finally, Socrates, with his disarming simplicity, reminds us to know ourselves. But what happens when you really begin to know yourself? Not superficially or conveniently, but in the deepest part of existence. You realize that many of your relationships, your words, and your commitments were desperate attempts to feel accepted in a world that barely knows itself. All of us have played that game at some point, wearing the right mask for the right setting. But what happens when you start, almost imperceptibly, to take those masks off one by one? Not out of rebellion, not out of pride, but simply because they no longer fit. This path is not for everyone. It is the path of awakening. It is the path of the one who sees beyond appearances. The one who understands that walking alone is not punishment, but the inevitable consequence of seeing the world with naked eyes. This is not a story about loneliness in its ordinary sense. It is about the silent transformation that happens when truth becomes more important than acceptance, when silence begins to carry more weight than words, when absence becomes presence and companionship becomes a detail. Prepare to walk through mirrors, to strip away illusions. Every word here is a whisper at dawn, intimate, profound, perhaps necessary. Awakening does not arrive as sudden illumination. It comes as a soft noise in the depths of consciousness, a subtle discomfort, a small fracture in the routine. At first, you don't understand. You find yourself in conversations, laughing as always, saying the right phrases, but something within no longer responds. The words sound hollow, the laughter feels rehearsed, and then you realize you are tired of acting. You watch others, and everything looks like choreography. People seeking attention without noticing, trading validation for belonging, faking confidence while trembling inside, and you slowly step out of the scene. Not out of disdain or arrogance, but because the script no longer works, and leaving it is the first act of freedom. You still go to work, take part in conversations, respond to messages kindly, but inside, something has changed. There is a silent withdrawal, a subtle renunciation. It is as if a veil has fallen, taking with it the certainties that once sustained you. You begin to see life behind the makeup. And what you see is uncomfortable, but real. People say you are distant, that you have changed, and they are right. You stopped molding yourself to expectations. You stopped smiling just to avoid seeming rude. You stopped nodding just to keep others comfortable. And by stopping, you discover something unsettling. Most of the connections you had were sustained by that effort. Without it, the bond loosens, often disappearing. It hurts, yes, but it is a lucid pain. Jung taught that the ego is nothing more than a social convention internalized. When you begin to see through it, the theater of coexistence loses its charm. You realize how much you sought approval, how often you stayed silent to fit in, how deeply you needed others to validate your worth. And suddenly, you no longer need it. That is where everything begins. You learn to sit in your own silence without fear. The company of others is no longer a crutch. The noise of the world is no longer required to feel alive. There is a strange peace in this, a disconcerting tranquility, because even if it looks like you are moving away from others, you are actually moving closer to yourself. It is as if, for the first time, you hear your own voice, the one that was always drowned by the fear of rejection. And that voice tells uncomfortable truths, but also reveals paths. It guides you inward, beyond the noise, and in that silence, something rebuilds. You begin to remember who you were, before learning to please, before chasing applause, before losing yourself in roles imposed by the world. Awakening is this return to the essential, the courage to see yourself naked, without characters, and it is also the acceptance that, in doing so, many things and many people will be left behind, not out of guilt, but as consequence. For when you rise, you naturally distance yourself from what can only survive on the ground. Most teachings of self-improvement revolve around phrases like, work harder, believe in yourself, just try more. But what if the problem isn't lack of effort, but the absence of a clear model to change from within? There is a process that shows you how to reprogram mental patterns, redefine identity, and build a life aligned with your values without relying on temporary bursts of motivation. Rooted in cognitive science, practical psychology, and timeless philosophy, it offers not just discipline and focus, but also clarity, coherence, and inner lightness. The solitude that follows awakening is not made of blank walls and oppressive silence. It is a living presence, dense and full, imposing itself without sound. It does not shout, But it does not ask permission either. It arrives with the lightness of something that always existed, waiting for you to be ready. And when you are, it reveals itself not as punishment, but as a mirror. At first it feels strange. The world always equated being alone with being less wanted, less loved, less human. Society endlessly displays smiling crowds, friends embracing, endless celebrations. But no one told you that there is something profoundly sacred in walking without company, in not needing to smile at anyone, in no longer bargaining your truth in exchange for belonging. Silence, once feared, becomes a balm. You no longer need to fill every space. You can let conversations die without guilt. You can sit anywhere without needing to be noticed. You can simply exist without a role, without performance. And it is precisely in that instant, when you stop acting, that freedom approaches. It does not arrive with an audience or applause. It comes like a warm breath on a cold day, like that moment at dawn when everyone else is asleep and you feel strangely alive. You no longer chase acceptance. You no longer pursue glances that affirm your worth. You realize how much of your life you spent trying to be seen and how exhausting it was. Now, by no longer seeking it, you feel whole, as if you have finally returned home. Many confuse this change with coldness. They say you have grown distant, dry, insensitive. But you know it is the opposite. Now you feel everything with greater depth. Only you no longer react as you once did. You don't need to dramatize or prove you feel. You simply feel. Jung also warned about the danger of constant distraction. The modern mind fears emptiness, so it fills everything with movement. But you have discovered that emptiness is not a void, but space. Space to breathe, to think, to simply be. And in that space, you begin to listen to yourself. And what you hear changes everything. Not everyone is ready for such silence. Some will try to fill it with noise, questions, or judgment. They will think you withdrew out of pride, but it isn't that. You withdrew because you needed to listen to something that only reveals itself in absence, your own voice. And when you hear it, it does not ask for audience or applause. It only wants you to remain present, whole, even when unseen. That is why, the deeper you enter the truth of solitude, the less it becomes pain, and the more it becomes choice. There is no more desperation, no more urgency. You can be with someone, but you don't need to. You can speak, but silence is enough. You can belong, but without losing yourself in the process. This silent autonomy is a revolution. You are not an exile. You are a traveler who chose the less illuminated path, the one with no signs or promises, but with truth. And truth, my friend, walks alone. There is a kind of connection that is not connection at all. It is performance. You only realize this when you stop trying to please, when you begin to listen to conversations, not only with your ears, but with your soul, and you sense that very few are truly listening. They wait only for their turn to speak, trading small doses of approval, repeating the same ideas, pretending agreement to keep the atmosphere light. You have done this, we all have, and maybe you still do it by reflex. But a moment comes when that effort hurts more than silence, and then something breaks inside. From that point on, you can no longer remain there, not because you hate people, but because you can no longer lie, neither to them nor to yourself. The relationships that once seemed unshakable now reveal themselves as fragile as thin glass. They were never built on truth, but on conventions. We complain about the same boss, laugh at the same jokes, agree with the same absurdities just to avoid conflict. And then something within you shifts. You stop complaining out of habit. You stop laughing out of obligation. You stop agreeing merely to maintain the bond. And what happens? The relationships begin to wither. Not out of cruelty, not because of conflict, but simply because they cannot survive your truth. Carl Jung reminded us that much of what we call social life is merely a hall of mirrors. You reflect back to me what I want to see, and I do the same for you. But the mirror shatters the moment one of us refuses to keep reflecting illusions. When that happens, the reaction is often strange. People drift away, not because you harmed them, but because you no longer hold them up. You begin to notice how much of these bonds depended on the constant maintenance of shared stories, small narratives of suffering, of success, of identity. But the issue is, you changed. To maintain those narratives, you would need to deny your transformation, and you no longer wish to deny yourself. So, you grow silent. Even when you know the answer, you choose to listen. Even when you disagree, you allow the words to pass. You no longer enter the game, and this confuses others. They begin to see you as cold, detached, arrogant. Yet in truth, you are more connected than ever, not with the egos of others, but with the depth of your own soul. Here lies one of the most painful, yet liberating discoveries along the path. Much of what we once called friendship was little more than an emotional negotiation disguised as affection. You praise me, I embrace you. You listen, I confirm you. But if one side changes the pattern, the whole structure trembles, and perhaps for the first time, you choose not to hold up those fragile constructions anymore. You are not rejecting people, you are rejecting the theater. And in doing so, yes, you lose much. But what you gain cannot be taken away. Integrity. From here on, the encounters that remain are fewer, but they are real. You recognize a glance that has also grown weary of pretending, a soul that does not demand performance, a presence that does not wish to mold you. And that is rare, so rare that sometimes you wait in silence for a long time. Yet you prefer the waiting to losing yourself in another false role. You have learned that it is not worth pretending simply to avoid loneliness, and that it is often better to be truly alone than accompanied by illusion. If there was any doubt, now it dissolves. An honest absence is far better than a conditioned presence. The peace that arises in solitude is not silent because it is empty, but because it is complete. After all the masks fall, after the fragile ties break, after the noise subsides, there you remain, whole, stripped of needs, of social anxieties, of expectations. And in that nakedness of the soul, something profound begins to bloom. Serenity does not mean becoming indifferent. On the contrary, you feel everything with greater clarity. But you no longer need to chase after validation, recognition, or companionship. You have learned to inhabit your own presence as one inhabits a secret temple. At first, others confuse this with apathy. They think you have renounced the world, but in truth, it is the opposite. You have simply chosen another way of being in the world, without noise, without pretense, without masks. You do not close yourself off, but you no longer force yourself open either. You do not avoid people, but neither do you seek them out of habit. Your energy now has a filter. Only what is real passes through. The truth is, once you find this peace, the volume of the world feels unbearably loud, and you, who once shouted for belonging, now walk in silence. Not out of shyness, but out of reverence. There is something sacred in no longer needing to be noticed, in no longer needing to be understood, to be authentic. Jung often pointed to the paradox of freedom. To truly live, one must flow with life, but not drown in it. That is exactly what this stage is. You no longer strive to be accepted. You no longer struggle to hold up what cannot endure. You simply flow, with calm, with presence, with the serene confidence of one who no longer needs to prove anything. Days change, faces come and go, but you remain steady, like a rock beneath the tide, untouched by the waves of approval. There is no longer desperation for encounters. If they happen, let them be whole. If not, the silence remains a worthy companion. The beauty of this new stage is that your eyes begin to see differently. Empty conversations no longer trap you. Social demands no longer sway you. The expectations of others no longer define you. You have become unclassifiable. You no longer fit into labels. You do not belong to groups. You do not respond to invitations out of politeness. And that freedom unsettles others, and at times, even yourself. For the price of truth is high. You lose stages, roles, applause. Yet in return, you gain something rare: authenticity. You walk alone, yes, but it is not exile. It is a journey. And on this journey, you discover that the peace of the solitary is not found in the absence of people, but in the absence of masks. You stopped diminishing yourself simply to be accepted. You stopped twisting your essence into unnatural shapes just to be liked. You stopped silencing your inner voice merely to preserve a false harmony. And that decision, Carl Jung would say, is the first act of courage. The courage to abandon masks. The courage to wait in solitude until something authentic arises. The courage to remain whole, even when the world prefers fragments. For the one who dares to be whole is the one who refuses to live as an incomplete projection of someone else's expectations. The peace of solitude, Jung reminds us, is not emptiness. It is the serenity of no longer hiding, of no longer demanding completion from another, of discovering that to dwell with oneself is, at last, to arrive home. Walking alone is not the destination. It is the unfolding path of individuation. It begins the moment you stop pretending, when you recognize that what many call life is often a rehearsal of survival, smiling without joy, repeating borrowed scripts, nodding in agreement to avoid conflict. Jung understood this repetition as the tyranny of the collective shadow, an endless performance of inherited patterns that numbs the soul. But to choose truth, your truth, is to embrace sacrifice. You will lose people. Invitations will vanish. Conversations will thin. Celebrations will forget your name. You will be misunderstood in 1,000 ways, and perhaps never in the right one. Yet still you remain, because you know in the depths of your being that any bond built on falsehood is not a bond at all, but a cage draped with beautiful curtains. Loneliness is not punishment. It is initiation. It is the secret threshold that opens only when you stop begging for belonging and begin to see that wholeness is more valuable than approval. True peace, the kind almost no one reaches, begins precisely when you cease to chase it. You do not walk alone because you despise the world. You walk alone because the world is not yet ready to accompany a soul who no longer plays a role. And still, somewhere deep within, you sense a quiet promise. One day, someone will see you, not the mask, not the persona, but the self that has been there all along. And in that silent recognition, without pretense, there will be connection. Until that moment, you continue forward with clear eyes, grounded steps, and a soul that no longer trembles before the silence. If you have reached this point, thank you. Not for consuming a video, but for keeping your heart open. This was never mere content to fill the void. It was a mirror, a whisper, an invitation to look deeper. I recall a night when I sat alone in a darkened room. Outside, the city pulsed with horns, hurried voices, restless footsteps. Inside, however, there was only silence. Yet for the first time, that silence was not empty. It was alive. It was presence. It was a beginning. That night, I realized I was not withdrawing from the world. I was moving closer to my true self. And since then, I have been learning to honor that path, even when it leads away from comfort and into the unknown. If these words have touched you, it is not by chance. Perhaps you too are walking the path of individuation. Perhaps you are discovering that only by losing what is false can you encounter the treasure of your real being. Perhaps, like in that darkened room, you are beginning to hear the quiet voice of the soul that has been calling to you for years. If so, welcome. You are not truly alone, even if your steps echo in solitude. This space exists for you, for those who long for depth over distraction, who dare to question, to unravel, to be remade. Thank you for allowing us, even briefly, even silently, to walk this stretch of the journey together. And if you feel the call to take this further, to reclaim sovereignty over your own mind, you will find guidance in the description and in the first pinned comment. There, you may understand how this process unfolds and why it transforms all who embrace it. And before you vanish back into the quiet night, if this spoke to you, you may like, comment, or subscribe. If you choose not to, that is fine as well. Pretend you clicked, if only to keep the old social play alive. And those videos now appearing on your screen, do not click them if you are tired. They are not distractions. They are doors. And once you step through, you may never again be the same. There is a devastating moment that every single one of us has experienced, but hardly anyone dares to put into words. It is that piercing instant when you realize that your best friend no longer knows you. Not because of betrayal, not because of a fight, not because something unforgivable happened. No, it is far more subtle and at the same time, far more brutal. You look into their eyes and realize you no longer recognize the person standing before you. And the cruelest part? They don't recognize you either. That strange ache you felt in your chest as these words sank in is proof that you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is the silent grief of understanding that the people who once defined your world eventually become strangers. And today, you are about to discover why the deepest friendships of your life were already destined to fade from the very first day. But here's the twist. This isn't a tragedy. It's evolution in its purest form. What I'm about to share with you challenges everything you've ever been taught about loyalty, connection, and human bonds. It intertwines the raw truths uncovered by evolutionary psychology with the profound insights Carl Jung gave us about how the human mind actually works. And once you hear this, you will never again feel guilt for the friendships that slipped away, because you will finally see that it was not your fault. It was not their fault. It was nature doing exactly what it was programmed to do. Let's begin with a truth so hard that no one ever tells you. The friendships you swore would last forever in your teenage years were designed to die. Not by accident, not because of neglect, but because that is precisely how the system was meant to work. Research shows that after the age of 30, we keep consistent contact with less than 20% of our high school friends. And here's the devastating part. It isn't coincidence, And it isn't carelessness. It's biology. Your brain is literally wired to abandon those friendships once they no longer serve your survival. Think back to your best friend when you were 15, the one you swore you would never lose, the one who knew your secrets better than anyone, the one with whom you made impossible plans for the future. That friendship felt like the most real thing in your entire world, sometimes even more real than your own family. But here comes the painful revelation. It was never truly about the two of you as individuals. It was about your brains using each other as tools to complete a stage of evolutionary development. And when that stage ended, your brains discarded the bond. That wasn't the collapse of a friendship. It was the success of a biological process as old as humanity itself. Carl Jung understood this silent machinery of the psyche, and modern science continues to confirm it in surprising ways. To grasp why this feels so cruel, you need to understand something unsettling about adolescent friendships. From a biological standpoint, those intense bonds were never designed to bring you happiness. They were designed to ensure the survival of your species. Picture yourself not as a modern teenager, but as a 15-year-old in the prehistoric world. Your survival depended on a single, brutal necessity. You had to separate from your family to avoid inbreeding and build alliances with other young people to explore dangerous territories. That's what those fiery, obsessive teenage friendships were created to achieve. They were an evolutionary mechanism, forcing you to step away from the safety of home, even when it meant risking your life. That is why teenage friendships feel so extreme. They are obsessive, they are exclusive, they are dramatic, irrational, and full of blind loyalty. Why? Because they needed to be powerful enough to pull you out of the comfort of your family and push you into the unknown alongside another teenager. That intensity you remember with nostalgia wasn't pure love. It was chemical manipulation. Your brain was flooding you with emotions designed to override rational thought, so that you would take risks no sane adult would ever choose. Think about it. Who hasn't done something reckless, even stupid, for a friend at that age? Who hasn't risked everything just to keep a bond alive? That so-called foolishness was your biology operating with perfect precision. It was training you, forcing you to form connections strong enough to survive beyond the family unit. And then came the brutality of evolution's design. Once you had learned to form social bonds, once you had understood how to navigate hierarchies and survive independently, the biological program that kept those friendships alive simply switched off. It was like a light going out. One day, the bond that once felt eternal suddenly felt irrelevant, and you couldn't explain why. And this leads us to the most devastating realization of all. Carl Jung's insights into the architecture of the human psyche explain why this feels so hauntingly familiar. Jung observed that our personalities are not static. They evolve, they transform, they shed old skins and grow new ones. The person you were at 16 is not the same person you are at 30, and your best friend was undergoing the same transformation. You didn't just outgrow each other, you became strangers, because the selves who once connected no longer exist. What's left are two new people, shaped by time, by change, by individuation, standing across from each other with no bridge strong enough to close the distance. That is why your best friend from adolescence feels like a ghost. They are both real and gone, familiar and foreign. And understanding this isn't meant to break you, it's meant to free you. Because what feels like loss is, in truth, evolution carrying you forward. Carl Jung had a revolutionary theory about how human personality develops. He called it individuation, and it explains perfectly why the strongest friendships of our youth often fade without anyone being at fault. During the first half of life, our personality is dominated by what he called the persona, a social mask we construct to fit into the world. In adolescence, this persona is constantly in formation, which is why we are so adaptable, so capable of merging completely with our friends. It wasn't conscious imitation, but the natural process of two people shaping their social masks side by side. Yet Jung noticed something fascinating. Around the ages of 35 to 40, most people experience what is called the midlife crisis. It is the moment when the psyche begins to demand something different, the real process of individuation. Individuation is the journey of becoming who you truly are, not who the world expects you to be. And here lies the crucial point. This process requires breaking away from external identifications that once defined your youthful identity, including friendships built upon those shared identifications. For years, it may have felt impossible to separate oneself from the other, but eventually each person needs their own space, their own roots, their own direction toward the light. If they remain entangled, both fail to grow. The same happens with youthful friendships. It is not that the bond failed, it is that each person is responding to a deeper evolutionary impulse, the drive to uncover their authentic individuality. And here comes the part that hurts, yet also liberates. This distancing is not personal. It is not that they stopped caring. It is that each is following the most natural path of human development. But there is more, because natural selection not only explains why this happens, it reveals why it must happen. Here lies the revelation that changes everything. Human relationships are subject to a process of natural selection, just as rigorous as any other aspect of evolution. Not every relationship is meant to survive every stage of your life. This is not a flaw in the system, but its most refined feature. Think of it this way. In nature, different species form temporary associations that benefit both under certain conditions. When those conditions change, the association dissolves naturally. There is no drama, no blame, only recognition that the purpose has been fulfilled. The same applies to human friendships, except that we interpret the process emotionally because we are conscious of it. The intense friendships of adolescence served specific functions. They helped you develop social skills, explore different sides of your personality, build the confidence to take risks, and create a sense of identity apart from your family. Once those functions were completed, the level of maintenance those friendships required began to outweigh their adaptive benefits, and your brain, which is always calculating costs and benefits unconsciously, began to redirect emotional energy toward relationships that served your current evolutionary needs. Pause for a moment and reflect on this. How much emotional energy did it take to sustain a best friend in adolescence? Those endless conversations, the intense dramas, the constant need for mutual validation. Now compare that with the energy you have available as an adult, with responsibilities, romantic relationships, perhaps children, and a professional career. The natural selection of relationships is not cruel, it is efficient. And here is what most people fail to understand. This process does not mean that adult friendships are less valuable or less profound. It means they are different, optimized for other functions. Successful adult friendships rely less on emotional intensity and more on compatibility of values, lifestyles, and life goals. They are less dramatic, but more stable, less exclusive, but more authentic. Have you noticed how the best friendships formed in adulthood feel different? There is less urgency, less need for constant reassurance, less drama. Yet there is more mutual respect, more space for individual growth, more ability to maintain connection despite differences. This is not coincidence, it is evolution in action. And once you understand this process, something extraordinary happens. You stop seeing the fading of youthful friendships as a personal failure and begin to recognize it as evidence that your psychological development is following its natural and healthy course. Now that you understand the mechanics behind the natural fading of friendships, the practical question arises: how can you navigate this process consciously and healthily? First, by recognizing the signs of a friendship in natural transition. A gradual decrease in contact without specific conflict, conversations that feel forced when they once flowed effortlessly, growing differences in life priorities, and a mutual sense that you are moving in different directions. When you recognize these signs, the natural impulse is to resist them. We tell ourselves we must try harder. We cannot allow our friendship to fade away, yet resisting a natural transition often accelerates the end and makes the separation more painful for both. Instead of struggling against it, practice conscious letting go. This means honoring what the friendship once was, without forcing it into something it no longer is. It means allowing interactions to become less frequent without interpreting that as rejection. Conscious letting go also involves honest communication when the moment is right. I have reflected on how much we both have changed, and it feels natural that our friendship should evolve as well. Second, invest consciously in friendships that align with your current stage of life. The bonds that thrive in adulthood respect boundaries without unnecessary drama, bring value to your present reality, remain connected even with less frequent contact, and support your individual growth. Third, develop the ability to form new friendships that are appropriate for your age and current path. Adult friendships are built differently, through shared activities rather than unlimited free time, through mutual respect rather than emotional intensity, through long-term consistency rather than constant connection. And here lies the most essential truth. Once you master this process consciously, you discover something that transforms not only your friendships, but also your relationship with yourself. When you finally accept that the natural drifting apart of youthful friendships is not a failure, but an evolution, you experience a deep freedom most people never know. It is the freedom to grow without guilt. For years, many of us have carried the silent burden of guilt for not being able to maintain lifelong friendships. We interpret every separation as proof that we are bad friends, shallow people, or that something is fundamentally wrong within us. But once you understand the evolutionary logic behind this process, that guilt dissolves. You realize your ability to form deep bonds has not diminished. It has simply adapted to your present needs. And something even more powerful begins to happen. You start to see your current relationships through an entirely new perspective. Instead of clinging desperately to each friendship out of fear of losing it, you begin to appreciate every bond for what it truly is in the present moment. You stop pressuring your friendships to fulfill roles that belong to earlier stages of your life. This acceptance also transforms the relationship you have with yourself. You grant yourself permission to evolve without the pressure of remaining consistent with earlier versions of who you once were. You understand that changing is not betraying who you were. It is becoming who you are meant to be. Think for a moment about how much energy you have spent feeling guilty over friendships that naturally faded. How many times have you judged yourself for no longer being the same person you were at 16, 20, or 25? Jung's idea of individuation suggests that clinging to outdated identities is one of the primary sources of psychological suffering. When you give yourself permission to grow, you not only release your former friends from unrealistic expectations, you also liberate yourself. And there is a surprising additional gift. When you stop forcing friendships that are in natural transition, you sometimes discover that a few of them can reconnect on an entirely new level. After individuation, two people who grew in different directions may meet again as whole individuals and create an authentic adult friendship based on who they truly are, not on who they once were together. But even when this does not happen, there is no real loss. The memories remain intact, the lessons endure, and the emotional space you free becomes available for new connections that serve who you have become. This is the beautiful paradox of human growth. Only by releasing what once was can we create space for what may come. We have traveled across complex emotional ground, from the painful confusion of watching close friends drift away to the liberating understanding of why this is not only normal, but necessary. The truth about friendships that drift apart as we grow is both simpler and deeper than we ever imagined. It is simple because it follows the most basic evolutionary laws. Yet it is also profoundly complex because it forces us to rethink our beliefs about loyalty, about change, and about what it truly means to grow. When we understand that the intense friendships of our youth are not random, but serve very specific evolutionary functions, we free ourselves from the guilt or the sadness that comes when those relationships inevitably shift, transform, or even fade away. These bonds, once the center of our lives, were not failures when they changed. They were part of a greater natural design. When we look at this through the lens of Carl Jung's idea of individuation, we begin to see that personal growth always requires a certain degree of separation from the identities we once shared with others. As children and teenagers, friendships often feel like an extension of ourselves, like mirrors through which we define who we are. But to truly grow, we eventually need to step outside of those shared identities. This is not an act of betrayal. It is an act of becoming. Recognizing this truth allows us to understand that there is a kind of natural selection at work in human relationships. Some friendships endure because they continue to serve our evolving needs, while others complete their purpose and gently fall away. And perhaps the most important lesson hidden in all of this is the following: the conscious ability to let go of a friendship that has fulfilled its role is, in reality, one of the most sophisticated forms of love. It is to love someone enough to allow them to grow, even when that growth takes them away from you. It is to love yourself enough to follow your own path of development, even if it requires walking in a direction where your old companions cannot follow. And it is to love the very process of life itself, to trust in its wisdom, to honor its rhythm, and to believe that every change carries with it a hidden meaning. In the end, friendships that change or drift apart as we mature are not failures of human connection. They are evidence that human connection is so advanced, so adaptable, that it can transform itself in order to meet the different stages of our journey through life. These changes are not signs of weakness. They are signs of growth. They remind us that the relationships we once cherished have already given us what we needed, and now we are free to step forward, carrying those gifts with us. Within this realization, we discover something invaluable. We find peace with our past because we understand that nothing was lost. It simply evolved. And we gain wisdom for the future because we learn how to navigate the ongoing dance of relationships, both with others and within ourselves. To grow, after all, is not to lose. To grow is to become. It is to step fully into the person we always had the potential to be, even if that means leaving behind versions of ourselves that no longer serve our becoming. So I invite you to reflect. Think back to your own life. What was the most important friendship of your youth? How has that relationship evolved over the years? And now, with this perspective, can you see the natural process that was at work behind those changes? Your reflection might not only bring clarity to your own journey, but it could also help someone else who is struggling to understand their own experiences with the transitions of friendship. Because when we see friendships not as permanent possessions, but as living connections that flow with the current of life, we begin to appreciate them more deeply. We no longer hold them with fear, but with gratitude. We no longer mourn their change, but celebrate the wisdom they have left behind. And in doing so, we walk forward with open hearts, ready for the next chapter, ready for the next connection, ready for the next version of ourselves. Before you leave, remember to subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming reflections. And let me leave you with this. Every friendship has its season, and when one cycle ends, it does not mean emptiness. It means that life is gently preparing you for a new beginning.